Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're tackling wildfires, but not for the perspective you're probably used to. We're going like 250 miles straight up to get a look at how these infernos look from space.
That is certainly a different way to look at it.
Yeah, our jumping off point here is a news story about an astronaut named Don Pettit. He took some amazing pictures of the LA wildfires from the International Space Station. So this was early January 2025. Multiple fires raging in LA County. You know how it is, dry conditions, those crazy Santa Ana winds whipping everything around. I can only imagine how intense those 100-mile-an-hour winds must feel.
They are quite a force to be reckoned with. From space, what really grabs your attention is the sheer scale of the fires. They're not just little pockets of flames. They spread out like crazy, almost like a network of veins across the landscape.
Yeah, the article mentioned how Pettit's pictures capture this almost eerie beauty, city lights twinkling right next to these massive blazes. So stark contrast.
Absolutely. And that contrast really drives home just how vulnerable human settlements are when these natural disasters hit. Imagine seeing your city from that distance, a tiny cluster of lights surrounded by uncontrolled flames. It really makes you think about how important being prepared is.
Definitely puts things into perspective. And that's a big part of what we're digging into today, this idea of perspective. How does looking at these fires from space actually help us down here on the ground?
Well, for scientists, this view from space is a goldmine of data. It helps them study how fires behave and spread. It's like observing a living organism, watching how it moves, how it interacts with the terrain, how the wind pushes it around.
So it's more than just pretty pictures. It's about gaining insights that can actually inform firefighting strategies.
Exactly. Take fuel load, for example. That's all the dry vegetation that a fire can feed on satellites can map this fuel load from space, which helps fire management teams figure out which areas are most at risk.
That makes sense. Identifying those high-risk zones means teams can focus their efforts on things like controlled burns or thinning out the vegetation to prevent those mega fires from taking hold.
Exactly. It's like giving the landscape a strategic haircut to keep those flames in check.
Speaking of strategy, let's talk about Don Pettit, the guy behind the lens. He's not your average astronaut. He's got this MacGyver in space reputation.
Oh, for sure. Pettit's known for being incredibly resourceful in tough situations.
The article mentions he invented a zero-gravity coffee cup because even astronauts need their caffeine, right? And get this, he built a water filtration system using spare parts. Talk about a problem solver. What's interesting is how that ingenuity in space connects to dealing with disasters back on Earth.
It all comes down to creative problem solving under pressure. Whether you're on a space station or facing a wildfire down here, resourcefulness and being able to adapt are essential.
Pettit's pictures are a powerful reminder of what we can see from space. But satellites take this to a whole new level, don't they? The article even linked to some satellite imagery of the fires. And that brings up this whole other layer of monitoring and analysis.
You're absolutely right. Satellites are becoming more and more crucial in how we understand and manage wildfires. They constantly send back data, tracking the spread of fires, assessing the damage, and they can even help predict future risks based on things like how dense the vegetation is and climate patterns.
We're talking about a whole different level of monitoring here. It's way beyond what we can see with our own eyes. What kind of tech are these satellites using to give us all this crucial information about wildfires?
Well, there are quite a few different technologies at play. Some satellites have special sensors that can actually detect heat signatures, so they can pinpoint a fire's location even before we can see it from the ground.
That early detection sounds pretty crucial. How does that work?
It's pretty amazing, actually. These sensors pick up on infrared radiation coming from the fire. We can't see it, but it's definitely detectable from space. And the best part, that data gets sent back to Earth almost instantly. So fire management teams know about a new fire often, even before someone calls 911.
Wow. That's like having a giant fire alarm for the whole planet.
You could say that, and having that early warning can make a huge difference in stopping a fire before it gets out of control.
This makes me think about how much our understanding of the planet has changed, even just in the last few years.
You're right. The technology is constantly evolving. For example, we're seeing huge leaps in high-resolution imaging. That means we can see even the smallest details of how a fire is behaving and how it's impacting the environment.
So we're not just tracking where the fire is going. We're getting a much more complete picture of the whole ecosystem that's affected by it.
Exactly. And all this data isn't just useful for responding to a fire right now. It's helping us understand long-term trends and make predictions about where future fires might break out.
That predictive element seems like a real game changer. How do satellites contribute to predicting wildfires?
They collect tons of data on things that contribute to fire risk, stuff like vegetation density, how much moisture is in the soil, even weather patterns. By crunching all this data over time, scientists can create models that identify the areas that are most likely to have wildfires in the future.
It's kind of like having a weather forecast, but instead of predicting rain or sunshine, we're predicting fire risk.
That's a good way to put it. And just like a weather forecast, these predictions aren't always perfect, but they give us really valuable information so we can prepare and maybe even reduce the risk.
Earlier, we talked about Don Pettit's background as a scientist and engineer.
Yeah.
And while his resourcefulness is really cool, the article also mentioned how good he is at communicating science to the public.
That's right. Pettit has a real knack for making complex scientific ideas easy to understand and interesting. He uses amazing photography, those demonstrations he does in microgravity, and of course his own enthusiasm to get people excited about space and science.
It sounds like he's a perfect example of how science isn't just for academics locked away in a lab. It's for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. And that's especially important when we're dealing with something as complicated and serious as wildfires. We need people to understand the science behind these events so they can make informed decisions about their own safety and contribute to solutions.
So it's bigger than rocket science and zero-gravity coffee cups. It's about using science to solve real-world problems that affect all of us.
Exactly. And people like Don Pettit are crucial in bridging that gap between scientists and the public. They spark curiosity and encourage scientific literacy.
It's like they're inviting us to explore the universe and discover its wonders. That desire to learn and understand is what drives progress and helps us overcome challenges.
I completely agree. So we started this deep dive with Don Pettit's photographs, but we've broadened our perspective to include the role of satellites in monitoring and understanding wildfires. What strikes you about this connection between human observation and technological advancements?
What I find interesting is that it's not a case of one replacing the other. It's not like human observation becomes obsolete because of technology. It's more like they work together. Pettit's pictures give us a unique perspective and a human connection to what's happening. And then satellites provide this huge data-driven view that helps us see the bigger picture.
That's a very insightful observation. It's all about combining different ways of knowing and different viewpoints to get a more complete understanding of the world.
And it's not just about understanding, it's about taking action. We've talked about how satellite data helps with preventing, predicting, and responding to fires. But this information also has implications for urban planning and how we manage land use, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Knowing where fires are most likely to happen can really inform decisions about where and how we build communities, how we manage forests, and how we prepare for the future as the climate keeps changing.
So we're taking this data from space and using it to take real action here on the ground.
Exactly. And it's not just about governments and big organizations making changes. Individuals can play a role too.
That's a good point. What are some things that regular people can do, even small things, to help find solutions?
Well, there are lots of ways to get involved. We can educate ourselves about the risks of wildfires in our own areas. We can support organizations that are working on preventing and managing fires. And we can speak up and advocate for policies that put forest health and climate resilience first.
So it's about taking what we've learned from this deep dive and actually putting it into practice in our own lives and communities.
You got it. And it all starts with awareness. Taking a minute to look at those satellite images, to really get a sense of how big and impactful these fires are, that can be a really powerful motivator to take action.
It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed when you think about these huge global challenges. Like, what can one person actually do to make a difference?
I get that. But remember, every little thing we do adds up. Think back to Don Pettit making that coffee cup out of spare parts on the space station. Might seem small, but it shows that resourcefulness and problem-solving spirit that we can all learn from.
That MacGyver thing we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Right? That ingenuity and willingness to find solutions even when things are really tough.
Exactly. And that same spirit can inspire us to take action here on Earth. It's about the choices we make every day, how we stay informed, how we get involved in our communities, how we use resources, being mindful and recognizing how interconnected we all are.
So individual responsibility, but also collective action.
You got it. Think about those satellite images. We're talking incredible technological leaps, but it also highlights our shared responsibility. We have this powerful tool to monitor our planet, to understand how everything is linked, and to make smart choices about the future.
It's like we've been given this amazing gift, the ability to see our world from a whole new angle.
Yep.
And now it's up to us to use it wisely.
Exactly. And that brings us back to you, our listeners. What can you do to make a difference? Maybe it's learning about wildfire risks in your area. Maybe it's supporting those groups dedicated to forest management. Or maybe it's speaking up for policies that prioritize a healthy climate and resilient forests.
Or even just taking a few minutes to really look at those satellite pictures, to connect with the scale of these fires and what they mean. Sometimes all it takes is a shift in perspective to get us moving.
I couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all crewmates on this spaceship Earth. And what we do collectively will chart our course. So let's be mindful, let's make informed decisions, and let's work together to create a brighter future.
Well said. I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've traveled from those fiery California landscapes to the vastness of space. We've seen the unique view that satellites provide. We've explored the inventive spirit of astronauts like Don Pettit. And we've seen how technology can deepen our understanding of wildfires.
We've talked about why it's so important to understand science and the need for action both individually and as a community, and the responsibility we all have to protect our planet.
But this is just the beginning. We encourage you to keep exploring. Look up those satellite images, learn more about Don Pettit's work, and keep those questions about the world coming.
Because as we've seen today, one little spark can ignite a whole wildfire of knowledge, action, and hope.